Welcome, everyone, to today's session called By Visibility Raising the Bar, hosted by EY or Ernst & Young. We're thrilled to host today's session and discuss this important topic with you. I am today's moderator. My name is Jamie Bergeron. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, and I use she and her pronouns. I work on the America's Diversity and Inclusiveness team here at EY. We're so excited to have this conversation today. It's a hot topic for us at EY, and one that we're really excited to be having right on the heels of International Bi Visibility Day, which took place in September. For me personally, this conversation is extremely important because as a queer, cis, femme woman, and also a person that has lesbian moms, I know firsthand the impacts of discrimination, both in our workplaces and also our communities. And so it's so important to extend the conversation about inclusion and belonging across all the different facets of our broad LGBTQ community. I'm thrilled to be joined by three amazing panelists today. So I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves. Just give me 1 second and I will move the slide. Here's a quick photo display of our panelists, but I will turn on their videos so you can see their faces and mine. Great. Okay, why don't we start with you, Bianca?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Bianca Giusto. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm located in Southern California, where I've been since quarantine started. I'm coming to this conversation as a bi cis woman, a multiracial background. My dad being Italian American, Irish American, and my mom being Vietnamese American. I'm also a former inner city educator, a dog mom, and a health nut. And just a few things about me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Bianca. Sichi, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Sichi Chong. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently based in London, and I am a cis femme bi woman who was born in Malaysia, and I currently work at EY in the Assurance and Banking and Capital Markets department, and I'm also the UKI Bi lead for their LGBT network.
Great, thanks, Sichi. And Victoria, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I use she, her pronouns. I currently live in New York, but normally I'm just running all over, living out of a suitcase. I identify as bi-queer, and one of the things I love about traveling is finding a queer community wherever I am, and that always makes me feel like I have a home and a little bit of a family, whatever country or state I'm in. And I'm really excited to talk with all the lovely people in this virtual room and hear about their experiences as well.
Great, thanks, Victoria. And we will, as we go through our session today, hear from each of our panelists about their personal experiences, as well as talk about what we've been doing at EY over the course of time to really raise the bar, just as the title of this session indicates, on bi visibility and bi inclusion. I want to just, before we really kick off, I want to take a moment to also recognize that this discussion and the celebration of Bi Visibility Day, which just took place, falls in the midst of what are truly global calls for inclusion and change. Over this past summer, we have seen so much calls for action. We've seen protests for independence in Hong Kong, demonstrations and rallies across Europe and the US and Canada and beyond for social and racial justice. The wave of change is really upon all of us, and that's the backdrop of our discussion today. It's worth mentioning because we'll really focus on the deep impacts of belonging, inclusion, and solidarity as we specifically speak about bi visibility. So I want to just set some context for everyone around why bi visibility matters so much and why at EY we've really taken a hard look at what we've been doing to support bi individuals at our firm. So while the topic of inclusion and visibility for bi people is often historically one of the least discussed topics, the bi community actually makes up the single largest population within the LGBT community. This is well documented across the research. And in fact, the population of people who identify with bisexuality, pansexuality, or generally a fluid sexuality or sexual orientation is increasing, especially among young people. We're seeing in the research that they are much less likely to have their sexuality fixed in stone and have their identity fixed in stone. And yet, despite those large numbers of representation of bi folks within the community, bi people report feeling that they belong less than any other sexual orientation. And this is a very important fact for us to consider. And we must be intentional in increasing the feelings of belonging for bi folks, but also increasing the understanding of bisexuality among non-bi folks and building a culture of allies. So with that, I would like to actually get our discussion started with our panelists about their experiences. So to kick us off, Bianca, would you mind sharing what are a few of those common misconceptions about bi people that you have faced personally and the impact of those on you?
Sure. Thanks, Jamie. So I think one of the ones that I've gotten throughout my my time being in the community and going to LGBTQ events is those times when I do have a significant other who is of the opposite sex or opposite gender, that I'm assumed as being an ally in those settings by my fellow LGBTQ identified brothers and sisters. And I think the misconception there is that they just make the assumption that I'm straight, which just makes me feel like a little unseen and makes me feel like more of an outsider rather than someone who's part of the community. I think that's probably a shared experience for a few more of the bi-identified individuals that I've met and spoken with. Another one that I'll mention is sort of a question that I got a lot, especially when I was first coming out to friends and family, is the question of like, what gender do you like better? And I think that there's just like a misconception there around like this black and white, like having to choose. And I think that makes at least my fluidity of my sexual orientation kind of feel overlooked or ignored. And it doesn't feel great.
Thanks, Bianca. Sichi, what about you? What are a few of those common misconceptions that you may have faced and the impact of those on you?
I've definitely faced the same ones Bianca have, for sure. And I really wanted to talk more about the whole preference within bisexuality. People always assume that if you're bisexual, it has to be 50-50. And what I've learned from going to so many events and doing other panels or like other bi-inclusion activities is that I think a lot of this misconception is quite, I guess, deep-seated within the LGBT community, that I often get people who ask me, oh, I've only ever had relationships with a woman, but I'm still attracted to guys. Do I count? And so often I get people asking me, do I count? That I think it's so important for people to realize that the idea of being bi or bi plus is that you're attracted to one or more genders, and it doesn't have to skew equally.
That's such an important point. And Sichi, I love how you phrase that in do I count? being validated by our peers, by our coworkers, by other people in the community is so important to how we see ourselves and whether or not we feel like we're a part of something or connected to people. So that's a really poignant comment, I think, about do I even count here? Victoria, I would like the next question to turn over to you and have you talk a little bit about the last time you felt the need to come out as a bi person. And when you felt that need to come out, did you go ahead and actually come out and what was that experience like?
So, unfortunately for me, I feel like I'm constantly coming out just because whenever I meet new people or I start a new relationship, everyone just assumes that I'm heterosexual. They look at me and they say, "Oh, you're a woman, you must like men." So, whether it's in the workplace or in my personal life, there's frequently that instance where I mention, "Oh, I'm going on a date with another woman," or in the past, I've dated women as well as men. So in the workplace, on a recent project, there was a time where I did make that decision to come out to my teammates, and it was a really supportive experience, which I'm really happy about. I'd spent a lot of time with them, both in the workplace and at happy hours and at team building events. And they were really supportive. They didn't make a big deal about it. They were like, "Oh, that's great. Tell me more about your date." So I think it was really great to have that supportive team experience when I did choose to come out to them.
Thanks for sharing that. Sichi, what about you? When was the last time that you felt the need to come out? And did you go ahead and come out when you felt that need?
So I've been with my partner for a while now, so I haven't really had the same opportunity or like the same experience. But in previous times, I think it's very unique to bi people that we come out multiple times throughout like our lives. Basically, with people who know you, they know you go on dates with women, and then one day you're like, "Oh, I have a boyfriend now." So it's a constant thing of like you having to explain to everyone that, "Oh no, it actually just means I'm bi." And it's the same, I think, when you're on dates as well. Sometimes when you come out to the people on dates, they just assume, especially when you're on dates with people of the same gender, they sometimes assume you're not fully out, which can be frustrating, but I guess that would be my experience.
Thanks for sharing that. Bianca, the next question is for you. Can you tell us a little bit about a time when you really felt like you were included and that your identity was well recognized and well respected by the other people around you?
Sure. So the first thing that comes to mind, it might not be exactly what you're looking for, Jimmy, but I did attend the Out and Equal conference last year, and there was a panel event somewhat similar to this, hosted by another company, and then also a round table with bi-identified individuals, and that just made me feel really great and included, and because we all had shared experiences and similar stories that we could tell, and just feel like, oh my gosh, like you get me, because I've been there too. But from like a work context, it's nice when my colleagues do things like forward me a link that they see from an LGBTQ related article, or maybe our Unity, our professional network at EY, our LGBTQ professional network has an event over the weekend, and someone like wants me to go with them, or like asks if I've seen it and if I'm thinking of going. And it's those things that it's kind of like sort of subliminally let me know like people are thinking about me, people are recognizing that I'm part of this community, and that they want to include me in those types of events.
Those are great examples. Victoria, what about you? Can you talk to us a little bit about a time when you really felt like you were included?
So recently I moved to a new neighborhood. I'm located in New York City, but I moved from one neighborhood in New York City into Queens, which is a little bit outside the Manhattan area. And since I moved, I've noticed a lot more pride flags and queer bars and queer coffee shops. And I loved the neighborhood that I was in before, but the neighborhood that I'm in now is a little funkier, a little hipper, and you can see all the queer representation. And that just makes me feel overtly welcomed. And there are little signs like that in some of the EY offices as well, like when people have the flags sticking up from their computers, just things like that, or posters telling us about the next Unity event. That really, it's that extra step that people take that say, you are welcome here, we stand with you. That really make me feel not only happy and safe, but welcomed as well.
Those are all great examples. What I liked about your two examples in particular was, Bianca, you spoke about those everyday actions that people can take, like that your colleagues can take in that one-on-one interaction. And then Victoria, you spoke about all of those outward symbols that are so important, that make us feel welcome and like we belong, even if a certain individual isn't necessarily taking that action to you directly. And I think that's a great way to say that allyship comes in so many different forms. And there's so many different kinds of things that can make us as queer people or bi people feel like we're welcome, safe, included, all of those things. Sichi, I have a question for you about the feelings of prejudice that exist within the LGBT community specifically. Can you speak a little bit about that prejudice or lack of inclusion within the LGBT community that you or that you think bi people in general face?
Sure. I think something that's common to bisexuality or being bi plus is that it's kind of the invisible or the forgotten identity, like, because it can be seen that people like to see us as either gay or straight. There's this dichotomy that kind of excludes us because as being not quite straight enough or not quite gay enough. And at the same time, it's also being seen as, in the LGBT plus community, as not being fully out. So I think in that sense, it's hard to feel included when people either see it as a phase that you grow out of and you, I guess, go to straight again, or as a phase you exit to become fully part of the LGBT community. So I think it's recognizing that bisexuality is an identity on its own that's really important to, I guess, undo these prejudices.
Totally. That's such a great point. And would you say that there are differences that bi people face depending on gender? So maybe that bi women face differently than bi men, or bi men face, or vice versa?
I think that's definitely a big one. With bi men, I think there was a campaign last year that I thought was quite inspiring called Bisexual Men Exist. Often bi men are immediately dismissed and counted as part of the gay camp, while for bi women, I think we have a more of an issue with being almost fetishized and our identity being seen as something like an accessory or not, or I guess the whole, it's just the college phase thing that women often have the misconception of.
Thanks for sharing that. And would anyone else like to comment on that?
If I can just jump in here, I really like what you said there. And I feel like the idea behind bi men is that they can't fully commit or fully admit that they're gay. So it's just kind of an in between. But with bi women, there's the idea that, oh, this is a horrible comment, but they're just doing it for attention, or like there are all sorts of negative connotations associated with both, instead of people just accepting that it's a real thing and this is how people identify.
Yeah, I think it's also just evident in like the LGBTQ and bi activist community. Like it's there's a lot more women that I see it being out about being bi and in that sort of activist role than I think we see with men.
Absolutely. And that's evident on our panel right now, right? We have the voices of three bi women speaking on this topic, and we don't have a man speaking on their experience. And so, certainly, we see that in our own representation at EY related to bi activism. There are more bi women who are out and visible within our Unity professional network than there are out and visible bi men. So that holds true within our community as well. This question I'll give to you, Bianca, about when or if you are in a relationship that makes you appear straight passing, how do you stay connected to the community? I think all three of you have mentioned already that invisibility, that bi invisibility that you've faced at various points. Sichi, I think you called it, the invisible identity. So, Bianca, how do you stay connected to the community when you're in a relationship that adds to that feeling of invisibility?
Sure, I think you can think of it in that framework you mentioned earlier of like the more one-on-one interactions than maybe more of like sort of the external, just like environment that you can place yourself in. So obviously staying connected with my friends who identify as LGBTQ plus is important to me. I am part of different like online communities, whether it's like Facebook groups or just group chats with some of my friends where we can share stories. And I feel like I can really like be open and transparent about my identity in those circles. At work, participating in the office events, I feel very fortunate to be part of a company that has the resources to have things like a LGBTQ professional network. So making sure to attend those, take on leadership roles when I can. We actually have, thought it was really cool. We have a Teams channel, like a Microsoft Teams channel specifically for people who identify as bi or bi plus at EY, which is nice. If you find an article or if you have a question, you can go to that place. And then from that external point of view, just going to community events like Pride parades. When I lived in San Francisco, there were like LGBTQ coffee shops that you could go to, and then just like repping the rainbow flag or the bi pride flag wherever I go.
I love that. The next question is for everyone to answer. What are some specific tips that you would like people to take to be an ally to bi plus people? And I'd love each of you to give your own examples of specific tips. So Victoria, why don't we start with you?
So I think the number one thing, whether you identify as queer or part of the community or not, is to listen and to recognize that everyone has a unique experience and see what you can do to help that person and listen and acknowledge that their feelings are valid. Everyone has a very unique and different experience, and if you can be next to them when they're having a tough time or be next to them when they're having a great day, those are both fantastic places to be in. And really, we could all use a friend every now and then. So if you can be that person, I think that's fantastic.
Sichi, what about you?
Definitely, as Victoria said, the sense of community is so important, and it's really like uplifted me having this bi community here at EY. What I would say as a tip for an ally would be also, I guess, to call out any microaggressions or any rude behavior towards bi people, because I guess the whole responsibility can't be shouldered on the people who are in the minority. So I guess to call out such behaviors would be really helpful.
Bianca, what would you add?
I think all great points so far. I think I've been kind of going through this exercise myself, just in the context of the Black Lives Matter movement and how we can be allies. better. And I think educating yourself, kind of along the lines that Victoria mentioned, educating yourself is one of those, the first steps. Not making assumptions when you do meet people, or even just before you know someone in the room is bi, just trying to, kind of use gender neutral pronouns, not make assumptions that someone has a husband or a wife. And then the last thing I'll mention is something that we've kind of rolled out at EY, are email signatures that have different types of inclusivity language, whether it's putting your pronouns in there or having like a little rainbow flag that says "I support inclusion." That's just ways to let people know that you are an ally.
Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences. I think one of my favorite parts of the culture within the LGBT community is the storytelling aspect and being able to hear different experiences from different people. I mean, you all were asked the same questions but had a different tip to share. And I just think always engaging in that storytelling is really key to continuing to build allyship and help people get an understanding of the similarities and the differences that exist within each community that's part of the broader LGBT community. So I would like to share a bit more about what we have been doing at EY in our own journey. So, our EY journey, specifically elevating bi visibility, has evolved over time, and it will continue to grow and evolve over time. So, like most organizations, much of the great work that has taken place across the LGBT community has been initiated from our people themselves, sharing their stories and calling on their colleagues to become better allies. And in sharing with you all some of the examples and ways that EY has engaged in raising the bar for bi visibility, it really, I want to focus in these 4 areas because I think this is where our work has really been focused in really taking the time to engage and learn from our people in the bi community through storytelling, just like we've done here today, in working to strengthen a network of bi allies. And Sichi will speak about that in just a moment. Focusing on educating around bi inclusion, and then letting our commitment to a culture of belonging really guide us throughout. So across EY, we're very committed to this culture of belonging and ensuring that people feel like this is a safe, comfortable, productive place for them to be, to work and engage. And that really has been our guiding focus in all of our efforts related to LGBT inclusion, but in our efforts specifically as well to raise the bar for bi visibility. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Sichi, to talk specifically about what's been going on in the UK and how you've really been activating a network of bi allies.
It's been a really busy year, actually, with the UK in terms of bi inclusion activities. We've done so much since the last Bi Visibility Day. It was a really memorable one for me last year because for the first time, the entire MLP office was lit up with a giant bi flag. Like you could see it from miles away. And at that same time, we held our EY Barclays Wave Space event, which brought together 30 plus companies to discuss best practices and create action plans that they could take back to their workplace. Off the back of this, an intercompany Bi Plus network actually formed, and this year, given everything is virtual, we had a intercompany roundtable, which was also moderated by EY and Barclays, where each company came together to discuss how to make bi inclusion more possible in the workplace. Aside from that, during the year, we've done a lot. That includes engaging with charities such as Mind Out and Bi Pride UK, as well as having a lot of these storytelling events where we highlight visible role models or train people how to be allies. For example, in conjunction with Bi Pride, we got the chair of Bi Pride UK to come and give the UKI community a session on how their best tips to become allies, as well as providing them an education into the BI experience. Aside from that, we've also had a number of intercompany BI lead. We've participated in a number of intercompany BI lead events, and we've actually seen a lot of like concrete improvements from that companies have taken to make workplaces more inclusive. And yeah, we've had a lot of these storytelling calls organized by you, Jamie. And Jamie, you've produced an amazing allyship resource as well that's been circulated. And in the APAC, we had a call as well. I think all over EY, we have people from all these different offices who are doing so much that it's hard to, I guess, be able to detail all the amazing things everyone has been doing. But yeah,
it's been a big effort for sure with a lot of people involved. CJ, could you talk a little bit about those BI leads that have been identified in various companies that you work with, and how are those people identified, and are those people by themselves, or are they also allies who are leading the charge within their own organization?
I think within the network there were, for example, at Barclays, it started off with a gay ally, and it's now being passed on to a BI plus person who's felt inspired and empowered as a result of these events to take up the, I guess, responsibility. And a lot of these people were just people within the respective companies' LGBT plus networks who are BI or wanted to improve BI inclusion, and they've all come together, I guess, to hold each other accountable, give each other ideas on how to improve inclusion in the workplace overall.
That's great. Thanks for adding that level of specificity, because I imagine that across companies, people will be at different places, right? So maybe not every organization can partner with their clients to identify BI leads, but when they get to that point, it will be helpful to know, who really should be doing that work. And I'm glad to hear that there are a lot of allies involved in doing that work as well, because they certainly play an important role. And you mentioned, Sichi, that we created some resource materials at EY, and I'd like to speak to that a little bit. We engaged in a process of creating what we call a global BI resource in order to have one set of commonly used education points and tips for allyship that we could share across our Unity professional network around the globe, and really begin to have a common language across all of our EY offices and as we're engaging in BI allyship work. So this resource served a few purposes. It educated on the terminology within the BI community, so why we might use BI plus as opposed to bi, or what the differences and similarities are between words like bisexual or pansexual and those communities. This resource also highlighted many statistics on the community. Some of those I shared at the top of this call, and then provided many tips for being an ally, such as confronting biphobia or being really intentional to ensure that bi people are always included on panels or in presentations where LGBT topics would be discussed. And as we put this resource, this educational resource together, we actually engaged in quite a long process of getting voices from around the globe. So we worked with our Unity professional network contacts on every continent around the world to really ensure that what we were putting forward really did reflect a common language, a common understanding, and common priorities for BI folks around the world. Also recognizing that there will need to be specific work done around the world depending on context. And that's where some of what you mentioned, Sichi, around different discussions that have been happening works as a supplement to that global BI resource or that educational component. So you mentioned doing many conversations and panels in the UK or in the EMEA region. In the US, we have had a number of different panel opportunities. We also have held a global BI panel call just a few months ago during June Pride Month. And we saw during that call lots of different kinds of questions that were really rooted in people's cultural context as well, and understanding that bi people, while sharing many of the same experiences, are confronting different biases or different levels of acceptance depending on where they live in the world, or depending on their family structure or the religious community that they're a part of, etc. And so we were able to crowdsource some of that support on that global call, which I think was really powerful. And in EMEA or in the UK, Sichi, you all have been working so much with clients and building an intercompany network. When we did our work in Asia Pac, it was really focused on storytelling and giving by individuals that visibility to get that dialogue started and allyship going. So I wanted to just give a few of those examples because this work is not a one and done. It's not as if our bi visibility started and ended with a panel. It didn't start and end with educational resources, and it didn't start and end from a US context. We're doing work that really can expand and be specific across the globe in similar and different ways. I've shared a lot about the different things we've been doing at EY, and thanks for what you shared, Sichi. I want to open it up again for any closing comments from any of our panelists about their experiences or about the work being done at EY.
I mean, I guess I'll just say it's great to see the increased focus on bi visibility. I think like you mentioned, Jamie, there's sort of the bi invisibility that happens when people aren't comfortable being open about that aspect of their self. And I think by making it more of a norm that it's a topic we can broach and talk about and put a spotlight on, that hopefully more people will feel comfortable in embracing that fluidity and that identity.
Additionally, it's amazing the support we've gotten from people in EY as well as all the Unity networks, and it's great that we're able to have this demand in the workplace to be able to participate in intercompany bi network events like this.
I just look forward to attending more events like this with EY and hanging out with all of you in the future and discussing bi and queer inclusion.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. And just to close us out, I just want to share again these 4 elements that we have focused on at EY: learning from our people, strengthening our network of allies, doing a lot of work to educate on bi inclusion, and creating that culture of belonging. With those 4 elements, we really have been able to get a lot of great work done to raise the bar on bi visibility, and it will continue to expand. And I also just want to point that on this slide, you'll see a preview of the front page of our bi inclusion resource that we really crowdsource and work together with bi folks around the world to put together. I want to thank Out and Equal for allowing us to host this important conversation as part of the summit this year. And I especially want to thank the 3 of you for sharing your stories with everyone and being so willing to be open and be vulnerable and put yourself front and center to really prioritize bi visibility and bi inclusion. So thank you to those that have joined us, and thank you to you all and Out and Equal. And we'll close it out. I will look forward to engaging with you all soon, and enjoy the rest of the summit.